Lost Vikings has kind of an interesting story about how it got started. Game had come out called Lemmings, and so that's actually how Lost Vikings started. It started with the idea that it would be a console game, and you would control hundreds of little tiny Viking units with different abilities.
It was this game with hundreds of little tiny blonde-haired 8-pixel tall Vikings, and it was very similar to Lemmings. You would have torch Vikings, you would have ladder Vikings, and you would use these different type of Vikings to scale castles, cross modes, defeat enemies.
And we wanted to build a whole game around that motif where you're trying to conquer enemy towns. So in some ways, sort of like a 2D side-scrolling version of what Warcraft was.
And then eventually it evolved down to fewer Vikings, 5 Vikings, 3 Vikings, 3 Vikings, each with very specific abilities.
And as we were prototyping it, we realized that on a TV, those little units didn't look very good. And then we started to kind of think about how players of console games like a little more direct control as opposed to indirect.
If we were going up against these big games, Mario, Sonic, games like that, we needed to have characters that compete with them. And hundreds of little Vikings couldn't do it. And when we all sat down and were playing it, we all saw this. It wasn't like one person had this idea and we went and decided to change it. Everyone was seeing it and going, this just doesn't feel right. It's too slow. We need to make this game a little bit faster, a little bit more fun. Our characters need to be characters that you can associate with, not 8 pixels of torch-bearing Viking.
And the technical challenges were pretty large, and we didn't really have a perfect design for it. You know, we were still exploring. And gradually the game morphed over time to become first 5 Vikings with individual skills that you would work through a level. And then later, because it turned out to be really time consuming to think about how to get 5 Vikings to move through a level, down to just the 3 that we see today.
As they worked on it, they just kept kind of more specializing and specializing the Vikings until they were actually just down to 3. And I think that's kind of carried over